He wants it. It's his jewel in the crown. It's the one thing that Putin wants to keep more than anything. But his land bridge is not safe anymore. Russia's experiencing a devastating 8-to-1 kill ratio. The armed forces of Ukraine now have up to 70 drones available for every single Russian soldier on the front line. Putin's air supremacy is officially on borrowed time. As Ukraine spoils Putin's party in his home city of St. Petersburg and the logistics lockdown begins to bite, there are critical updates from the front lines. I'm Philip Ingram, and this is Battle Plans Exposed. On the battlefield, reports show an absolute explosion in Ukrainian drone superiority, forcing a staggering 8-to-1 kill ratio against the occupiers. Prominent Russian military bloggers admit that Zelensky's army has deployed up to 70 drones for every single Russian soldier on the front line. On top of this, there has been a massive uptick in vehicle kills by Zelensky's army. They're smashing their records on a daily and monthly basis, thanks to their successful drone and middle strike campaign. 542 Russian vehicles were destroyed in one day. In May, 7,704 vehicles were taken offline. That's 256 every 24 hours. Tanks, armoured personnel carriers, fuel trucks, expensive anti-air systems, all the essentials needed to keep the war going, and they're now ending up on the scrap heap. That brings the tally to over 100,700 since the invasion began. But it's not just the long-range strikes that are strangling Putin's war machine. There's exciting weapons updates that could have serious impact on the air war. We'll also look at where these Ukrainian attacks are leading and ask the question, can Ukraine go on the offensive? Before we get into all of that, let's begin by looking at what's been happening on the front lines. What you're seeing here is a strike on Project 20380 Steregushny class corvette. The Boyki, this $120 million guided missile warship, is one of the most capable surface combatants Russia has got in the Baltic. Just last year, this vessel was guarding Putin's shadow fleet of oil tankers passing through the English Channel. Ukraine flew attack drones, dodged Russian air defences to strike the Boyki whilst it sat helpless in a dry dock. Moscow promised that the security around St. Petersburg had been heavily tightened because Putin is hosting his glitzy International Economic Forum there. Instead, Putin is preparing a keynote speech on Russian stability whilst his home city burns in the background. To allow a swarm of attack drones to penetrate 700 miles into Russian airspace and strike a heavily defended naval base during a high-profile presidential event shows huge gaps in their radar coverage and their surface-to-air networks. But it's also because those Ukrainian drones are flying well below the range of Russian radar systems. They're allegedly spotted skimming just meters above the Gulf of Finland on their way to the target. The Baltic fleet is no longer safe in its home port. Expect Ukraine to press home this advantage. No, this isn't the next Mad Max movie. Russian forces took a standard cargo truck, cut the roof off completely and attached a trailer. The goal, to turn this bizarre creation into an improvised pontoon vehicle for river crossing operations. But Ukraine's Vodkovnavny unit spotted the rig as it was being moved forward towards the front line. Working together with adjacent artillery teams, they tracked it down to the water's edge. Before the Russians could even put their makeshift bridge to use, Ukrainian strikes blew it to pieces. Crossing a river is one of the most dangerous and complex operations an army can face. It requires specialist engineering vehicles, heavy armoured bridging units, and a tight anti-drone and anti-air cover. This shows just how desperate the invaders are for proper engineering equipment, how poorly trained they are, and how tightly Ukraine is watching every single move they make. But it also shows something we've seen across the front line in many different areas, innovation being used in a Mad Max style, trying to provide something that will do the job whenever their own logistics systems can't provide the properly designed military equipment to do it. There's ingenuity here, but the ingenuity just didn't work. What you're seeing here is the latest test launch for the FP7, a brand new ground-launched anti-tactical ballistic missile. So it's a rival for the Patriot, designed and built by Firepoint. The specs are formidable. boasting a range of up to 200 kilometers and carrying a devastating 150 kilogram warhead. More importantly, it is built for speed. The FP7 launches into the sky at about 1,500 meters per second. It can go up to 2,000 meters per second. That is Mach 4.4, making it incredibly difficult for standard Russian air defenses to intercept it, but giving its ability to intercept ballistic missiles, whether they be and hypersonic missiles, hypersonic cruise missiles and ballistic missiles in their final trajectory. From a strategic perspective, the emergence of the FP7 represents a massive leap forward for Ukraine's defense industry. The FP7 will serve as the basis for the planned Freya anti-ballistic defense system, providing Kyiv with a lower cost alternative to Patriot interceptors amid ongoing air defense missile shortages. And it provides a capability that doesn't come with any caveats. So it's Ukrainian produced. The Ukrainians can use it where and when they want and need. For the past few years, the biggest constraint on Ukraine's deep strike operations has been the political red tape attached to Western weapons like Storm Shadow and ATACMS. By developing their own capabilities, Kyiv is effectively cutting those strings. If you're thinking, why is it pink? Well, that's a little internal joke from the engineers at Farpoint. The initial production batches of the FP7's older brother, the FP1, nicknamed the Flamingo, turned out pink due to a factory error while mixing protective base coatings. Instead of wasting time fixing it, they tested the prototypes exactly as they were, and as we can see here, the FP7 is following that tradition. I've also heard stories that it was a flamingo pink because that was the only paint that they had. Who knows, but humour is an integral part of war. And finally, Britain helped the French Navy seize a Russian Shadow Fleet tanker in a dramatic operation in the Atlantic. French President Emmanuel Macron shared this video showing his naval forces swooping in through thick clouds. Helicopters hovered over the sanctioned ship named the Tagore before elite troops rapidly rappelled down to its deck. The raid took place around 400 nautical miles west of Brittany, with the UK providing critical support. The vessel had sailed from Murmansk in Russia and was caught falsely flying a Cameroonian flag while steaming toward Africa. Macron hit back at angry Kremlin claims of piracy, blasting Putin's Shadow Fleet for illegally funding the invasion of Ukraine. We'll begin by analysing Russia's latest mass attacks on Kyiv. Here we have Kyiv in the north of Ukraine. Overnight, on June the 2nd, Putin unleashed a massive strike package. A total of 729 aerial weapons were fired at Ukraine. That included 73 missiles, ballistic missiles and cruise missiles, and 656 attack drones. Air defences fought back hard, downing 40 missiles and 602 drones across the country. That still meant 87 devices with high explosives got through, hitting military but also civilian targets. 7 people were killed in the capital and more than 80 were injured as residential blocks and hospitals were hit. The question we have to ask is, why now? The reality is that Putin is desperate. His army has lost momentum on the battlefield, so he is raining missiles on civilians instead. According to the Institute for the Study of War, Moscow is trying to exploit a critical shortage of Patriot interceptor missiles. They know Ukraine's stocks are depleted, and they are trying to force Ukraine to use what it has left. The FP7 we saw earlier can't come soon enough. But this is also a classic psychological operation designed to hide Russian weakness. Putin cannot protect his own deep rear. Ukraine's long-range drones are hitting Russian oil refineries and military hubs over 1,000 miles away. Even worse for his ego, Putin is still trying to recover from a massive public humiliation, or a second massive public humiliation. The first one, back in May, he actually had to ask Ukraine for permission to hold a dramatically scaled-down Victory Day parade in Moscow. Or President Zelensky gave him permission for it, because he was terrified of an assassination attempt via drone strike. These mass strikes are a desperate attempt to break Ukraine's will to fight. The second humiliation for Putin was, of course, the recent strikes on St. Petersburg, Putin's hometown, as he's opening his International Economic Forum. But military history shows us this tactic fails. During the Second World War, Hitler launched the Blitz on London, killing 23,000 people. It caused immense suffering, but it did not break Britain's resolve. It actually hardened it. At the time, dramatic radio reports broadcast live from London rooftops shocked the United States. Hearing the bombs fall in real time captured American hearts and helped turn public sentiment toward backing Britain in the war. Putin is making the exact same mistake in Kyiv today. Ukrainian public resolve is hardening. Ukrainians know that they are fighting for the very existence of Ukraine, for the very existence of their families. They know if they stop fighting, Ukraine ceases to exist. The Russians should know that if they stop fighting, the war stops. Now let's widen our view and wargame exactly what Ukraine is planning next. For months, the big question has been whether Ukraine can launch a summer offensive. The data shows they're already setting the stage. Moscow's spring offensive has completely stalled. In fact, Russian forces have suffered a massive net loss of territory over the last 2 months. Putin's army is exhausted and Kyiv smells blood. The prime target? Crimea. Ukraine launched a massive coordinated strike across the peninsula and has choked off critical supply lines. More than 20 Ukrainian attack drones hit the critical naval port of Sevastopol, whilst precision missile strikes smashed military targets in Simferopol. This isn't just random bombardment, it is a highly calculated campaign to systematically eliminate Russia's air defensive. Kyiv is blinding Putin's forces before the real push begins. But the real story of this stalled Russian advance isn't just happening in Crimea. It's happening right across the zero line, where absolute Ukrainian drone superiority has frozen Putin's army in its tracks. The scale of this technology is terrifying. Prominent Russian military blogger Rybar has sounded the alarm, revealing that the armed forces of Ukraine now have up to 70 drones available for every single Russian soldier in the front line. If a Russian troop moves, changes position, or tries to dig a trench, they're immediately hunted by dozens of first-person view quadcopters. It has made large-scale Russian armoured movements virtually impossible. And that brings us to the pure mathematics of this war. The Finnish president recently confirmed that the casualty figures have tilted dramatically in Kyiv's favour. Right now, Russia is experiencing a devastating 8-to-1 kill ratio. For every single Ukrainian soldier lost, 8 Russian occupiers are being killed on the battlefield. As an intelligence planner, I can tell you that no army, not even Putin's, can sustain those kinds of losses. So is a full amphibious invasion of Crimea on the cards? Well, Ukraine doesn't need to storm the beaches. By using this overwhelming drone wall to choke Russian logistics and break their air defences, and this drone wall is covering from Russia through the occupied areas of Ukraine, this land bridge into Ukraine. At the same time, Ukraine is disrupting Russia's ability to utilise the Kerch Bridge or ferries that operate between the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea, crossing into Crimea, disrupting their logistics. They're forcing Putin into a slow, humiliating retreat without ever having to launch a bloody frontal assault. So what is this doing? This is effectively turning Crimea into somewhere that Putin can't operate from. He wants it. It's his jewel in the crown. It's the one thing that Putin wants to keep more than anything. But his land bridge is not safe anymore. He can't resupply it across the Kerch Bridge anymore. The people in Crimea are lacking water, fuel, food. You can't get fuel. You can't get petrol or diesel inside Crimea. It is slowly but surely being choked to death. This is a siege without having to surround it with troops. And finally, let's take a look at a significant arms deal from a European ally. Sweden has formally greenlit a historic deal to supply Ukraine with up to 20 brand new Gripen E/F fighter jets, alongside 16 older Gripen C/D models as direct military aid. President Zelensky has signed a letter of intent for up to 150 of these jets to rebuild Ukraine's air force. But we need to be realistic. Yuri Hinat, Ukraine's head of Air Force Communications, has rightly warned us to avoid lazy game-changer cliches. These jets won't change the front lines overnight. Just like the F-16s, Ukraine is getting older models first, and any new platform must be tested in real combat conditions. However, as a military planner, I see three massive advantages to the Gripen. First, they're incredibly cheap to maintain and easy to operate. They're designed to operate out of austere sites. Secondly, they were built specifically for Cold War conditions, just like the Ukrainians are fighting in. They can take off from short, dispersed runways and even civilian roads, meaning they're more agile to avoid Russian missile strikes on airfields. Ground crews can fully refuel them and rearm them for air missions in less than 10 minutes. You can hot refuel these aircraft when they're on the ground. And what does that mean? That means while the engine's still running and it's just landed, you can refuel it and it can take off again. They don't have to shut the engines down to restart them like you have to do with many other aircraft. But here's the real weapon that Moscow is sweating over. The Gripen is fully compatible with the European-made Meteor air-to-air missile. This is widely considered the most effective long-range aerial missile in the world, with a range of up to 200 kilometers. Unlike normal missiles, the Meteor uses a ramjet engine. It screams through the sky, maintaining maximum speed and energy right up to the moment of impact, making it impossible for maneuvering targets to escape. This missile poses a direct existential threat to Russia's top-tier Su-35 fighters and their multi-million-dollar A-50 spy planes. Ukraine doesn't even need to shoot them down. The mere presence of the Meteor missiles will push Russian bombers so far back from the borders that they can no longer drop their devastating glide bombs on Ukrainian frontline positions. It is a massive technological leap forward. The turnaround crew required to get a Gripen back into the air isn't some massive team of specialized engineers. It takes just a single fuel truck, one qualified crew chief, 4 basic mechanics, and a utility van with the missiles. That is it. On a freezing roadside, a crew of 6 can have a Gripen refueled, rearmed with Meteor missiles, and back in the sky in under 10 minutes. For Russian military planners, trying to find and target these tiny hypermobile setups is an absolute nightmare. Putin's air supremacy is officially on borrowed time. So that's all for Battle Plans this week. I'm Philip Ingram. Thanks for watching. If you like what you've seen, please share it amongst your friends. If you've got any comments or any requests for what you want us to do, please put them in the comments below. And of course, tell other people about what we're doing here. And again, subscribe to our channel because that'll give you exclusive access to our content early. But thank you for watching. Goodbye.